Mr. Mark Levin. How are you, my friend?
Mr. Glenn Beck. Let me look. I'm good, thank you.
Good. I'm pretty good. You know, I'm a little concerned about, 2024. Can't come up with a scenario where it ends well, but maybe you can.
It's such a mess. I mean, you got people talking third party. I think if Nikki Haley, who I really oppose, I mean, I call her George Bush in a dress, and she pretty much is. And
with her foreign policy, she is. With her foreign policy, absolutely.
Well, look at her domestic policy. As soon as she wanted to invite the Palestinians in Gaza into our country, she lost her mind?
Yeah, that's...
She gave land to communist China in South Carolina, and now she pretends she's a hardliner. She's never been a leader on any of the issues that matter to us, whether it's abortion, whether it's the border, whether it's tax cuts. And I looked at these allegations by DeSantis, and he's right. Go on, Google them, look at them. She refused to sign a bill that said men use men's rooms and ladies use ladies' rooms. Now, when he came to the woke war, she sided with Disney. I'm going, what's going on here? This woman is not going to be able to fight the Marxist revolution that is surrounding us and swirling around us today, which is why Karl Rove and Romney and this guy Fink at Blackstone or BlackRock, whatever the hell they call themselves, all these people, including liberal Democrat billionaires who are going to vote for Biden, are backing her. So so she goes third party, The rhinos are the fifth column. They're the fifth column in our party, and frankly, they're the fifth column in this country, along with the media. The Democrats, once they get their fighting out of the way, they'll back Biden. They would back a kumquat for president.
No, I know they would.
It means that but our guys, they'll splinter. The base is always supposed to march behind whatever the Republican establishment does. Okay. But this goes to your point, doesn't it? Which is, it's concerning.
If the way you feel about Nikki Haley, would you fall in line behind her?
I don't have to. She's going to fall before I have to fall.
No, I know. But if she were the candidate.
No, I've had enough.
Okay. All right. Me too. However, if it's Biden or I think Michelle Obama, I'd vote for a kumquat.
Yeah, and I don't think it'll be Michelle Obama. By the way, you haven't heard a word from her, have you?
No, we haven't, but it's the only scenario that works out. I mean, let's
at the convention.
Yeah, that the super delegates, they just forget the vote. They just say, you know what, he's too ill or whatever, he's too frail. The Democrats want another choice. We nominate Michelle Obama.
Believe it or not, if that happens, I think they're going to swing to Hillary. But it doesn't matter what we think.
Yeah, I know.
The problem is what's happening right now is this grotesque effort to try and put Donald Trump in prison.
So
you read this a-hole who filed this with the Supreme Court. He's always wanting to cut the corners. He doesn't get attorney-client privilege, so ruled an Obama judge. All these privileges, presidential privilege, executive privilege, attorney-client privilege, all denied Donald Trump. He doesn't want to go through the normal appellate process because he can't get his trial going before the election. It takes years to have a full-blown criminal trial, particularly when you're creating constitutional issues of first impression. So he brings us to this point. Now he's demanding that the Supreme Court hear his motion against Trump as soon as possible. And these dimwits, they say, okay, we'll consider your argument. Trump's lawyers, you have 1 week to respond. And go, what? You had a case in Pennsylvania during the course of this election, not about ballots, not about voting machines, a pure constitutional question, a legitimate question about who gets to decide and write election laws in the state. The governor, the Board of Elections, or the legislature, like the Constitution says in black and white. They wouldn't even take up that case. You have other cases that people are waiting for in front of the Supreme Court. Not to get too much in the weeds, these Enron case, they used the obstruction in the Enron case against these January 6ers, which doesn't apply. It doesn't even meet the elements. So they're on appeal all the way to the Supreme Court, and the same day the court says, okay, we want to hear these arguments on the motion from Jack the Ripper Smith there. The court says, we're going to punt on this for now. Well, maybe we'll consider it later in the year or next year. You got people sitting in jail. So this is really amazing. You have a case, this Judge Chutkan, I had a great lawyer on my program, Schoen is his name, David Schoen, and he said, Mark, I've been sitting 3 years waiting for a decision from this judge who wants to have a trial on Trump in a 5-month period. It's all a setup. And so this guy, Jack Smith, the courts are bending over backwards to accommodate this guy. He wins every single motion. Trump loses every single motion in front of this radical Obama judge. The appellate court, which is overwhelmingly Democrat, because when Harry Reid was the Senate leader and Obama was president, they added seats to the D.C. Circuit and filled it with Democrats. This recent panel had 2 Obama appointees and 1 Biden appointee. The judge that Trump's dealing with now is an Obama appointee. The judge Trump was dealing with before that was another Obama appointee. And now we go to the Supreme Court, and I'll tell you, Glenn, John Roberts is a huge problem. John Roberts is like this guy, Michael Ludig. They hate Trump. Mm-hmm. The Republicans, but, they're proper Republicans. They don't like the tweeting. They don't like the language. Oh, my goodness, all this stuff's going on here. It's just so unseemly. It's so improper. They're just used to losing the country very properly,
Yeah.
But what's happening here, in my view, is we have a Potemkin criminal justice system. We have judges that wear black robes. You go into these mahogany paneled courtrooms. You've got a prosecutor standing over there. He gets his desk. The defense gets their desk. Eventually, you have a trial. The jury sits over there. It all looks so proper. It all looks so constitutional. And it's all bullcrap because all these movements and actions before this trial, the motions filings, the decisions on the motion filings and everything, they will determine the outcome of this election. And just finally, I know I'm rambling a bit, but I tend to do that. One of the things that troubles me a lot here is this.
Yeah.
This guy charges Trump with a Klan Act violation, with 2 Enron violations, and a federal contractor violation. These 4 statutes. So it was bogus. It is bogus. But his arguments, which had been allowed by this judge, his paper filings, are all about insurrection and seditious conspiracy. In other words, and this is a grotesque violation of prosecutorial ethics, grotesque. He is making the case without having proved the elements of the crimes that he's basically arguing for, that Donald Trump knew or had to know that what he was saying, what he was doing, what he was texting, what he was reading, prove that he wanted a violent event to occur that day. So why didn't you charge him with that? He's not charged with violence about anything. He's charged with the Klan Act and obstruction and all the rest of these things. And the judge rules, oh, that's okay. What's okay? So he's charged with 4 phony charges, but this guy's arguing something completely different. And other serious litigators or former federal prosecutors or whatever are saying, this is not the way this is supposed to be done. And it's all happening. The Supreme Court should not take this case up. There's no emergency reason why this case has. By the way, if you read this motion, this clown keeps talking about the public interest, that people have a right to know. What does he know about the public interest? He sits holed up. He's in a room with 10 other reprobates. They're making all these decisions on their own, and then they speak for the public. Well, they sure as hell don't speak for 80 million people. And so the judiciary, I would argue, is doing severe damage to this country, allowing incredible interference in this election process.
Well,
and when it's all said and done, they'll never recover.
I will tell you that John Roberts is the kind of guy who thinks we should rule on this and let this go forward. Otherwise, we'll be blamed for it. And they'll say, oh, it's the judicial activism of the Supreme Court. So we're protecting the Supreme Court by letting this small injustice, as they would think, just let this pass. Let them do it, and they hash it out, and then our hands are clean. It's an act of Pontius Pilate, quite honestly.
100%.
Yeah.
I call him Hollywood John. He's very worried about what's said about him and thought about him. His wife and Thomas Friedman over there at the New York Times, they're best friends. They get caught up in these social circles, which always go the way of the left. And I don't trust this guy. I don't even trust Kavanaugh. And Barrett is a complete disappointment because she's right under Roberts' wing. You really have three tremendous constitutionalists. Then you've got a couple of rhinos, and then you've got the hardcore left Democrats. I'm worried about this.
So Alan Dershowitz has said, just based on the speed of this trial, he's like, there's no way Donald Trump could even prepare for a defense. And he said, we are at a banana republic if that isn't stopped. He's like, there's no way that this trial should go forward next year only because of the amount and volume of documents that have to be processed. He said it's criminal if they speed this trial up or they let it go at this rate. Do you agree with that?
I mean, you denied him a time privilege. You did it in a secret proceeding. That's a violation of the Fifth Amendment under the phony claim of a crime fraud exception. So his lead lawyer in the January 6th case had to testify in front of the grand jury, and he had to provide his notes that he had taken with Donald Trump. And we've never seen anything like this. We don't know what they're talking about. It's all done in secret. That happens. I'm told other things happened in front of that grand jury that were absolutely unacceptable by some of the lawyers working on this case. So what he's talking about, Dershowitz, there is a violation of due process, Fifth Amendment, and the Sixth Amendment, which is the right to effective counsel. You can't have effective counsel when they're drowning in documents and witnesses and everything else, and the judge, for no reason.
He said that there is no way that he said if that lawyer stands in front of that judge and he says, no, you have to proceed, and they aren't ready because there's no way possible. He said he should quit immediately and say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to abide. And if that means you're going to hold me in contempt, hold me in contempt. But this is a travesty of justice.
Well, I guess that's right. I mean, every lawyer has to make their own decision on how to proceed. So I don't know if I'd do that or not. I really hadn't thought about it. That said, he's right on the substance of the issue, 100% right. Now, the problem with all this is this lower court judge and this prosecutor all know that they're setting Donald Trump up for a conviction. So when he runs for office as president in the general election, the media and everyone else will keep calling him a convicted felon, a convicted felon. So the people who are kind of on the edge, kind of leaning toward Trump because they can't stand Biden, we know who these people are. We live with people like this, right? In our communities, in our neighborhoods, we meet them. He might lose them. And that's the goal.
Right.
And you can see the hundreds of millions of dollars in campaign funding that's going to be spent by the Democrats in the Biden campaign, or in your case, the Michelle Obama campaign, I guess, talking about how Trump is a convicted felon and then he'll want to pardon himself. So we won't be talking about inflation and the border.
Right. So can we game this? I don't know how much time you have allotted in your schedule. I know you're so busy.
For you, the whole week.
Okay. All right. I want to war game this out with you just a little bit because I have no idea about it's my understanding the Constitution will allow him to run and to be president and run a campaign from jail. But I don't know. So can you go through this? What happens if the court comes back and the jury comes back and says he's guilty and he's a convicted felon? What happens then? We get into that in 60 seconds. So all of the best legal minds that I know all say that no matter what the evidence in Washington, D.C., he's going to be convicted. Do you believe that?
I fear that.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead. And I'll tell you why. I mean, if you're not really able to present your case, if you're not really able to study the evidence,
Right.
And in addition to that, to bring forward counter evidence, exculpatory information, because you can't get your head around it because of the time frame. If you're in a city that goes 94% for Biden and the jury's picked by that, out of that population, if you have an Obama judge that is ruling in every single instance for the government, when you have a prosecutor who is utterly and completely unethical, who is using tactics that in most courtrooms would be rejected, you're setting up a scenario where nobody could survive because you're targeting this defendant. The charges are preposterous. And by the time you can actually get to an appellate court, it's over. And so that makes what Jack Smith is doing is so horrific, because he's trying to jump the appellate court on a constitutional issue to get to the Supreme Court, and the court is at least entertaining the idea, whereas the defendant, Donald Trump, can't get his constitutional issues up there that fast because the Supreme Court has decided over and over and over again, no, you go through the trial, you go through the appellate court, you need to fine-tune the constitutional issues, then we might take a look at it. So the whole system, and really, as you well know, and your listeners well know, you can have the best constitution on the face of the earth, the best judicial system on paper, but if you don't have people of virtue, particularly judges, none of it works. It doesn't matter what's on paper. There is no due process. There is no right to counsel, and effectively that's what's going on here. So the likelihood is very high. Now, here's the problem. If the court does take up this case for this argument and rules against Jack Smith, that is that Donald Trump does have immunity from actions he took while president after he leaves the presidency, then the government really doesn't have a case. They're in huge trouble. And this case will go on longer.
No way that John Roberts allows that to happen. No way.
That's my fear.
Yeah,
but I want your audience to understand why this is important. It's important because if you don't retain that protection when you leave the presidency, any opposing administration at the Department of Justice will wait for a president to do whatever he does, and then when he leaves, indict that president. You will destroy the office of the presidency. That's the problem. So when this judge says he thinks he's a king, he can have immunity even when he leaves the presidency, that's not what he thinks. He's saying, look, all these bogus allegations you're making against me occurred when I was president. As president, you certainly couldn't indict me for these.
Right.
So you can't indict me now. Oh, no. That protection doesn't go beyond the time that you're in the office of the presidency.